On the endless sky plains, danger rarely announced itself with open hostility. More often, it arrived cloaked in coincidence, an unexpected meeting, a fleeting glance, a cultivator who appeared ordinary at first sight. Han Li had long since learned that the truly fatal threats were never those that bared their fangs immediately, but those that lingered quietly in the shadows, waiting for the moment one let down their guard. If you enjoy my way of explaining and storytelling, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep creating. Under the present circumstances, being able to unleash such a ferocious spirit insect was nothing short of a priceless safeguard to his life. A subtle ripple passed through Han Li's heart. The small banner in his hand instantly swelled to several times its original size. The fully matured, gold-devouring beetle circled him, once its carapace glinting faintly. Before settling upon the banner, dense black ki surged forth, shrouding the banner in turbulent waves. In the blink of an eye, the beetle vanished without leaving behind the slightest trace. Moments later, Han Li casually tossed the banner toward his black-green nascent soul. The nascent soul let out a clear, childish laugh, opened its mouth wide, and swallowed the yin-sifting banner whole. A flash of spiritual light followed, and the nascent soul soared upward, merging into the crown of Han Li's head before disappearing completely. Han Li drew in a long breath and slowly closed his eyes. He began to carefully contemplate the incantation used to dissolve the pestilence demon's soulic seal, preparing for any unforeseen calamity that might arise in the future. However, his expression suddenly shifted. His eyes snapped open as he turned his gaze skyward. Although his cultivation had been sealed, Han Li's powerful spiritual sense remained unaffected. If his perception was correct, a cultivator of the soaring tribes had once again flown above the grey heron tribe's escort. This discovery amused him somewhat. The soaring tribe's cultivator was clearly searching for someone, undoubtedly him. Over the past 2 weeks, that individual had appeared like clockwork, passing over the caravan once every 3 days before hastily departing. Not once had he questioned the mortals below, sparing Han Li the trouble of employing the concealment techniques he had prepared in advance. Though the situation left him mildly puzzled, Han Li was more than content with this cautious method of searching. He promptly closed his eyes again, returning to his quiet contemplation. At that moment, Ying Lu's loud voice rang out among the escort. "Everyone tighten your formation. In 2 days, we'll reach the designated temple encampment. Once we arrive, we can rest safely for several days." Temple encampment. The words caused a flicker of movement in Han Li's heart. He murmured to himself briefly, then dismissed the matter and once more immersed himself in understanding the incantation. Half a day later, Han Li sensed the approach of another escort from a nearby tribe. This group wasn't particularly large, though it outnumbered the Grey Heron tribe's escort by more than a dozen people. Judging by their direction, the 2 caravans would cross paths in roughly 2 hours. Seeing no signs of hostility, Han Li chose not to inform Ying Lu. Sure enough, about 2 hours later, the 2 escorts encountered one another, stirring up quite a commotion. Both sides hurriedly formed defensive ranks only for the tension to dissipate in an instant. Ying Lu and the leader of the Red Wolf tribe's escort turned out to be old acquaintances. Overjoyed by their reunion, the 2 leaders quickly agreed to travel together. The Red Wolf tribe's leader was a burly man with a thick, unruly beard. He glanced curiously at the carriages behind Ying Lu and asked Brother Ying, "Does your tribe have an immortal accompanying you? Is he riding in one of those carriages?" Instead of answering directly, Ying Lu countered, "Your tribe's immortals aren't in your carriages. Did you bring them along?" "Immortals?" The bearded man shot Ying Lu a sideways glance and muttered, "There was only one. An unaffiliated immortal. I had to swallow my pride and pay an enormous price just to secure his protection." "Don't tell me you have 2. Because of their close friendship, he spoke without reservation. "2? Ying Lu let out a helpless sigh. "Of course not. I only have 1 as well, and even then it took no small effort to persuade him to protect us on this journey." The 2 men exchanged bitter laughs, sharing a mutual sense of hardship. Afterward, Ying Lu added, We're only a day away from the encampment now, so nothing should go wrong before then. But afterward, we'll be passing through the territory of a major tribe. It would be best to remain cautious. How about traveling together with a few other small tribes along the way? It'll be safer, especially since we have an immortal among us. The large man hesitated briefly before replying, "Let me think on it. The last time I traveled together with several small tribes, I was dragged into trouble because one of them was carrying an incredibly precious item. Brother Bar, that sort of thing rarely happens." Ying Lu shook his head. For small tribes like ours, the odds of carrying something truly valuable are far lower than the odds of being robbed regardless. "Fine, I'll give it some more thought," tribe leader Bar replied. Meanwhile, the combined escorts traveled side by side, chatting amicably. The particularly beautiful women from both tribes soon found themselves surrounded by eager young men, their clear laughter ringing through the air from time to time. Chosen to present tribute, these women were naturally among the most beautiful in their respective tribes. It was only natural that the young men were filled with excitement. Hearing their laughter, Ying Lu couldn't help but shake his head. He was just about to tell them to quiet down, lest they offend the immortal in the carriage, when a strange, piercing shriek suddenly echoed from the heavens, unmistakably audible to everyone below. Ying Lu's expression changed drastically. He immediately turned to look at tribe leader B. The large man's face had gone pale terror, clearly written across it. "Everyone dismount and hide," Ying Lu shouted urgently. "They're simian vultures. Hurry, summon Immortal Han." At the same time, tribe leader Bar roared at his own people. "Hide in the carriages. Quickly call Immortal Feng to deal with these demon birds." The mere mention of simian vultures threw both tribes into chaos. People tumbled from their horses in panic, some even falling flat onto the ground. They hastily lay prone or scrambled into the carriages, their faces deathly pale as they stared up at the sky. 3 black specks appeared overhead, rapidly growing larger. In the blink of an eye, they resolved into 3 enormous demon birds. Each possessed the head of an ape and the body of a bird. Their wings stretched nearly 6 meters wide, and from their bodies protruded a pair of fur-covered ape arms. As they descended, they let out blood-curdling screeches that chilled the soul. Although simian vultures were only Grade 2 demon birds, they were far more vicious and intelligent than most demon beasts of the same rank. Their strength was monstrous, their claws capable of rending metal apart, and their shrieking cries were effective even against early Foundation establishment cultivators, let alone ordinary mortals. Normally, a single one appearing on the plains was rare enough. The presence of 3 at once plunged the escort into utter despair. A cold snort rang out from one of the Red Wolf tribe's carriages. In a flash of crimson light, a figure in blue robes shot into the air. Standing atop an embroidered scarf, he sneered disdainfully. "What's there to panic about?" he said coolly. "Aren't they just Grade 2 demon beasts?" Ying Lu stared at the man in alarm. This immortal wore an azure cloak over his head, and his voice sounded youthful. "Immortal Feng, please be careful. There are 3 of them," tribe leader Bar cried anxiously. When Bar had hired Immortal Feng, he knew the man was only at the early Foundation establishment stage. Even dealing with a single simian vulture would be difficult, facing 3 bordered on impossible. The thought left Bar's heart heavy with dread. As for Ying Lu, he quickly shifted his gaze toward one of his own carriages while lying flat on the ground. There he saw another man clad in an azure cloak standing calmly atop the carriage and gazing into the sky. The sight of Immortal Han immediately put Ying Lu at ease. As long as his cultivation wasn't too low, the 2 immortals joining forces might just be enough to fend off the 3 simian vultures. At that moment, the demon birds naturally noticed the blue-robed immortal floating in mid-air. They hadn't expected an immortal among the escorts, and clearly understood he wouldn't be easy prey. Yet unwilling to abandon their quarry, they hesitated briefly before beginning to circle at a distance of roughly 300 meters. Courting death, the blue-robed man snorted. Seeing the vultures refuse to retreat, irritation flashed across his face. He raised his hand and flung out several talismans at once. In an instant, 3 fiery serpents, each nearly 3 meters long, took shape and lunged toward the vultures. Fire serpent technique. Han Li couldn't help but exclaim inwardly upon seeing this. Although the fire serpent technique was merely a low-grade spell, talismans of this type were far from cheap. For a Foundation establishment cultivator to use them so casually was no small expense. Han Li narrowed his eyes slightly, a trace of interest flickering within them, only to fade moments later into a quiet sigh. At such a great distance, the 3 fire serpents posed little real threat. The vultures easily evaded them. Worse still, it was obvious that the blue-robed man lacked a proper understanding of how to command the technique, failing to pursue the enemy once they dodged. The talismans were wasted, serving only to provoke the demon birds. The largest vulture let out a furious screech. In response, all 3 spread their wings wide and dove straight toward the blue-robed cultivator. Seeing his attack fail, the blue-robed man froze for an instant. When he finally noticed the 3 vultures charging at him, panic overtook him. He hurriedly retrieved a small gleaming white sword and began chanting an incantation as fast as he could, directing it toward the incoming beasts. Han Li frowned deeply at the sight. With the enemy already attacking, the correct response should have been to erect a defensive barrier first. Attempting to control a magic tool instead was tantamount to suicide. Clearly, this cultivator lacked real combat experience, though the small sword itself was a high-grade magic tool, hinting that he possessed some measure of backing. The blue-robed man's chanting was smooth and practiced. Just as the vultures arrived, the magic tool activated. In a flash of brilliant light, the small sword transformed into a meter-long streak of white radiance, slashing toward the vulture in the center with terrifying speed. Sensing mortal danger, the vulture blurred in a desperate attempt to dodge, but it was already too late. It could only raise one claw to block. The white streak stalled for but a single heartbeat. A piercing scream tore through the air as the black claw was cleanly severed. Blood sprayed in all directions. Yet, at that very moment, the other 2 demon birds had already swept above the blue-robed man's head, their 4 massive claws reaching down toward his crown. The blue-robed cultivator's face instantly drained of color. In a panic, he hastily urged his flying magic tool to retreat, barely managing to evade the combined assault of the 2 simian vultures. It was only then that he realized he had gravely underestimated them. As Grade 2 demon beasts, it was only natural that they possessed fearsome abilities of their own. Before the 2 vultures could fully descend, they let out a piercing, soul-shaking shriek. The moment the sound reached his ears, the blue-robed cultivator felt as though a heavy hammer had smashed into both his body and spirit. His vision blurred, his figure swayed uncontrollably, and he nearly lost balance in mid-air. Immediately after, a gust of foul, fishy wind swept down upon him. The blue-robed cultivator cried out in terror, his complexion turning deathly pale. At that critical instant, 2 muffled explosions echoed through the air. 2 fist-sized fireballs shot forth and struck the incoming vultures head-on. Brilliant red light flared as raging flames burst outward, engulfing the 2 demon birds. The surrounding air warped and shimmered under the blistering heat. The simian vulture's shrill howls came to an abrupt halt. Having narrowly escaped death, the blue-robed cultivator was filled with sudden elation. Without hesitation, he recalled his magic tool and retreated over 40 meters in a flash. Only then did he hurriedly retrieve a talisman and slap it against his body. A yellow barrier of light immediately spread across his form. Feeling the protection settle around him, the blue-robed cultivator finally let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Only now did he fully understand the vast difference between theoretical spell techniques and real combat. His lack of experience had nearly cost him his life. With lingering fear in his heart, he subconsciously glanced downward and was startled to see Han Li, also clad in an azure cloak. Naturally, the blue-robed cultivator knew very well who had saved him. The fireballs Han Li had released while infused with Foundation establishment cultivation were not enough to outright kill Grade 2 demon beasts. Soon after, the two simian vultures burst out of the flames, their appearances now even more grotesque. Much of their flesh had been scorched away, exposing charred muscle and bone. Yet they no longer paid the blue-robed cultivator any attention, instead veering sharply toward Han Li. As for the vulture whose claw had been severed, its eyes burned crimson as it rushed straight back at the blue-robed cultivator in a frenzy. Han Li looked up at the two massive demon birds and unconsciously furrowed his brows. With a flick of his wrist, he slapped the pouch at his waist. Instantly, two streaks of white light shot forth, each revealing a half-foot-long snow-white centipede. Compared to the enormous simian vultures, the centipedes were minuscule. Yet they vibrated with excitement, exuding not the slightest hint of fear. The moment they appeared, the two centipedes shot forward to meet the vultures head-on. The demon birds' ape-like faces immediately twisted in terror. They flapped their wings, frantically, forcibly halting their charge. After drawing in the scent with their nostrils, they even attempted to flee in panic. The aura of ancient exotic insects was something low-grade demon beasts simply did not dare to approach. Unfortunately for them, the centipedes had no intention of letting their prey escape. With a shrill, monstrous screech, the centipedes opened their mouths and spat out streams of icy white glacial qi that surged forward at astonishing speed. The vultures could only release miserable cries before being completely engulfed. A violent gust followed as the centipedes plunged straight into the glacial qi without the slightest hesitation. Seeing this, Han Li calmly withdrew his attention from that side of the battlefield and turned toward the blue-robed cultivator. At this moment, the blue-robed cultivator was drenched in sweat as he desperately controlled the small sword. Despite having lost one claw, the injured simian vulture was still ferocious, fighting just as savagely as before. Its body blurred into a brown streak as it circled him incessantly, screeching without pause, occasionally lunging forward to rake at the yellow light barrier with its remaining claw. The relentless attacks left the blue-robed cultivator flustered and mentally strained, unable to fully focus on controlling his magic tool. Although the flying sword itself was formidable, its wielder was far too inexperienced. He had only managed to injure the vulture earlier by catching it off guard. Now he could barely keep up with its movements. As for his remaining talismans, they were completely beyond his ability to deploy. Controlling the sword alone already demanded his full concentration. If nothing changed, defeat and death were inevitable. A cold glint flashed through Han Li's eyes as he observed the vulture circling several times in mid-air. Just as he considered stepping in, the vulture seemed to sense something amiss. It let out a sharp cry, abruptly abandoning its pursuit, then spread its wings and shot away more than 40 meters in an instant. The sudden retreat startled both the blue-robed cultivator and Han Li. Han Li merely snorted. He casually raised his hand. A thin red thread shot forth. The vulture's body suddenly froze in mid-air before plummeting straight to the ground, where it struck with a dull thud and lay motionless. Having only recently arrived in the endless sky plains, Han Li had nonetheless already heard of the deep grudges simian vultures were known to harbor. Unwilling to leave behind future troubles, he chose to eliminate the threat decisively while he had the chance. Han Li's sudden strike left the blue-robed cultivator utterly stunned. He cried out in alarm, "A flying needle! You actually use flying needle magic tools?" Han Li glanced at him calmly. "What? Is there something strange about that?" He waved his hand toward the vulture's corpse, and a red streak shot back into his palm. Resting there was an inch-long, sparkling silver needle, faintly glowing with red light. Of course not. It's just before the blue-robed cultivator could finish, two muffled crashes rang out. Two massive, sparkling white blocks of ice fell from the air, smashing into the ground and leaving meter-deep craters. Encased within the ice were the other two simian vultures, their eyes wide open, unmistakably dead. The blue-robed cultivator stared in shock. Moments later, white light flashed from the ice blocks and two streaks of light flew out, circling Han Li once before settling upon his shoulder. The blue-robed cultivator swallowed hard. "Esteemed fellow Taoist," You cultivate spirit insects. Han Li gently stroked one of the centipedes on his shoulder and replied evenly, "That's right. I personally nurtured these two glacial snow centipedes." The glacial snow centipedes were not something Han Li had fabricated. They were a genuine type of exotic insect. Once mature, their appearance closely resembled that of six-winged frost centipedes. Without deep experience in exotic insects, distinguishing between the two was nearly impossible. To Han Li's surprise, the blue-robed cultivator's eyes lit up with eagerness. Would fellow Taoist be willing to part with the flying needle and these spirit insects? "I am willing to pay an exorbitant price." Han Li was momentarily taken aback. Then he smiled faintly. Is fellow Taoist joking? These insects have already acknowledged me as their master. And as for the flying needle, you likely wouldn't be able to afford its price. Spirit stones are of no concern. The blue-robed cultivator blurted out without hesitation. Name your price. His heart had been deeply stirred by the sight of the needle instantly killing the simian vulture. Han Li narrowed his eyes slightly. After scrutinizing the man for a long moment, his expression cooled. My apologies, but this needle suits me very well. For now I have no intention of selling it. If that's the case, then so be it. The blue-robed cultivator replied with visible disappointment. If I possessed such a sharp magic tool myself, I wouldn't part with it either. His gaze flickered before he continued calmly. My name is Feng Yue. I haven't yet properly thanked you for saving my life. May I ask for fellow Taoist's name? My surname is Han Li replied indifferently. Let's restore order first. Restore order. Feng Yue was momentarily stunned before looking around. At some unknown point, the mortals had emerged from hiding. They stood up hesitantly, crowding together more than 30 meters away, their faces filled with awe and reverence. Only the leaders of the two tribes stood nearby. They appeared excited, especially Ying Lu, whose expression was one of unrestrained joy. Ying Lu had clearly seen all three simian vultures slain by immortal Han. The strength this immortal displayed far exceeded his expectations, filling him with delight. It seemed that Han Li alone would be more than enough to safeguard the entire journey. Han Li called out calmly, "Deal with the demon beasts. Bring me their claws and tail feathers. As for the rest, use them as you see fit." According to the rules of the plains, the slayer of a demon beast had the right to claim all of its parts. Though the materials were crude and of low grade, they still held value for a foundation establishment cultivator, especially under Han Li's current identity. "Yes, we will follow your orders," Ying Lu replied eagerly. While the flesh of the simian vultures held little worth to an immortal, it was extremely valuable to mortals and could be traded for many necessities. Tribe leader Ba also responded respectfully. Soon after, loud calls rang out as the burly youths of both tribes stepped forward to deal with the corpses. The vulture killed by the flying needle was easily handled, but the frozen ones first had to be shattered. "If immortal Feng is unharmed, you should return to your carriage and rest," Han Li said coolly. "I'm feeling somewhat tired myself and will be heading back as well." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked back toward his carriage. Han Li's indifferent manner left Feng Yue at a complete loss. He had originally intended to befriend Han Li after witnessing the power of his magic tool and spirit insects. Yet Han Li had abruptly ended the exchange and departed, leaving him standing awkwardly in place. Between the debt of having his life saved and the overwhelming strength Han Li had displayed, Feng Yue could find no grounds to object. After a long pause, he could only sigh and return to his carriage with lingering frustration. Unbeknownst to him, Han Li was already seated cross-legged within his own carriage, silently watching Feng Yue retreat. Master Silvermoon's puzzled voice echoed in his mind. That person seems to have considerable backing. Why has Master chosen to distance himself from him? After resting for some time, Silvermoon had finally recovered enough strength to speak freely once more. That person does not belong to the soaring tribes. What? Han Li's sudden remark left Silvermoon momentarily stunned. How does Master know this? Take a look at this. Han Li opened his palm. A ball of soft blue light gathered above it. slowly revealing the image of a jade pendant engraved with ancient characters. Silvermoon's voice carried unmistakable shock. These are ancient characters of the Great Jin. In truth, Han Li continued calmly. Even if I hadn't intervened earlier, nothing would have happened to him. The jade pendant Feng Yue carries is a top-grade protective magic tool. Each time the demon birds drew close, it automatically released layers of spiritual fluctuations to shield him. He concealed it at his waist, beneath nothing more than a thin layer of fabric. With my bright sight spirit eyes, it was plainly visible. He most likely comes from a noble clan of the Great Jin. Silvermoon fell silent for a moment, then spoke thoughtfully. That makes sense. According to ancient records, the Feng of Ning was a noble clan that relied heavily on the prestige of its name. It seems our fellow Taoist Feng should actually be fellow Taoist Feng instead. But which Ning is it? The state of Ning among the 36 territories of the Jin Empire, or West Ning Province, one of its 108 provinces, or perhaps merely a common city named Ning. Because Han Li had long intended to enter the Jin Empire, he had acquired many ancient records regarding it. Silvermoon's deductions did not surprise him. He knew she had studied those records as well. Regardless of which great Jin clan he hails from, Han Li said evenly, his appearance in the endless sky plains already signals trouble. The less contact I have with him, the better. Right now, our priority is leaving the plains and finding a way to dissolve the baleful qi within my body. With that, he closed his eyes. Silvermoon let out a soft chuckle. That's true. For someone only at early foundation establishment to possess a protective magic tool of that level, he must be an important figure within the Feng clan. Yet he chose to hide himself within a tribute escort of a small tribe. There's bound to be trouble trailing behind him. After that, Silvermoon also fell silent. Not long afterward, several of the tribe's youths finally managed to smash apart the massive blocks of ice imprisoning the simian vultures. With heavy hammers, the 3 demon birds were properly butchered, and the most valuable materials, the claws and tail feathers, were respectfully delivered to Han Li. The remaining parts were divided between the 2 tribes. Naturally, since Han Li was the immortal invited by the Grey Heron tribe, they received the larger share of the leftovers. Though tribe leader Ba obtained little, he was nonetheless satisfied his tribe had gained an unexpected harvest, despite the fact that their immortal had not slain a single beast. Inside the sealed carriage of the Red Wolf tribe, the blue-robed cultivator removed his cloak, revealing a pale face. Aside from his overly thin lips, his features were rather handsome. His expression was cold as he reached up and felt around his neck, eventually pulling out a golden chain. Attached to it was a silver key as thick as a finger and several inches long. Mysterious patterns were engraved upon it, along with a single golden character, Feng. Staring at the key, Feng Yue's expression turned complicated. Excitement and pain flickered across his face in quick succession before finally settling into gloom. He let out a long breath and carefully put the key away. After ensuring it was once again concealed beneath his robes, he closed his eyes and began restoring the magic power he had expended. Soon after the final simian vulture was processed, the 2 tribes resumed their journey. This time no one dared speak loudly. Though the battle had been brief, it had deeply shaken the youths of the soaring tribes. Those with spirit veins were especially stirred, their hearts burning with longing. They wished they could immediately reach the temple and obtain the vast power of an immortal. The following day passed without incident. As Han Li quietly comprehended the incantation to dissolve the pestilence demon's Solok seal, the so-called temple encampment entered the range of his spiritual sense. Out of caution, Han Li did not dare extend his spiritual sense too close. He feared that high-grade immortals might be stationed nearby. Nevertheless, he faintly detected numerous fluctuations of spiritual qi, indicating the presence of many low-level cultivators. His gaze flickered slightly, though his expression remained calm. After traveling another 10 kilometers, cheers erupted from both tribes. Han Li's expression shifted subtly. He swept his sleeve aside, opening the carriage curtains and looked into the distance. The surrounding plain stretched flat and wide. Far ahead, a massive black silhouette loomed. Blue light flickered in Han Li's eyes, and the scene became instantly clear. A wall 12 meters tall, constructed of thick stone and logs, encircled the area. Behind it stood towering fir tents, favored by the soaring tribes, along with several crude wooden structures. Mortals moved about from time to time, lending the encampment a semblance of liveliness. Amidst the tents and wooden buildings stood a large hall carved from a single massive stone, surrounded by a sparse cluster of smaller structures. From time to time, strangely dressed cultivators could be seen entering and exiting the hall. As Han Li's gaze swept the perimeter, he noticed enormous stone pillars erected around the encampment. Each pillar glowed with dazzling light, towering over 100 meters tall and thicker than a person's width. This was clearly a large-scale spell formation laid down by the Endless Sky Temple to protect the encampment. No cultivators flew within the area, making it obvious that aerial travel was restricted. After giving the encampment a brief assessment, Han Li lost interest and let the curtain fall. 2 hours later, the escort arrived at the entrance. There were no guards to speak of, and the group entered freely. Yinglu and tribe leader Ba exchanged a few words before parting ways. Within the encampment, Han Li observed everything through his spiritual sense. It was exactly as it appeared from afar, chaotic. Fir tents and wooden structures were scattered haphazardly, with only the main roads kept clear. Aside from the stone buildings, everything else was clearly temporary shelter for tribes passing through to offer tribute. Only the small tribes that traveled the farthest needed to rest here. Larger tribes lived closer to the temple and had no such need. As a result, most of the tents were plain and worn, some even patched together. Only the wealthier tribes possessed slightly larger tents with minor decorations. It was obvious that these small tribes were far from prosperous. After some difficulty, the Grey Heron tribe finally found an empty area in a remote corner and began setting up camp. Han Li stepped out of the carriage and watched indifferently. Yinglu hesitated briefly before approaching him respectfully. "Immortal Han, this place is quite disorderly. I fear it is unsuitable for the peaceful cultivation of an immortal such as yourself. There is a resting area specially prepared for immortals. Might Immortal Han consider staying there? In 2 days we will resume our journey." "Very well," Han Li nodded. "In 2 days, I'll come find you." With that, he headed toward the tallest structure in the encampment, the massive 2-story stone hall where cultivators frequently entered and exited. After walking a short distance, Han Li arrived before the hall. Flanking the entrance stood 2 15-meter-tall sculptures, flood dragons with the heads of bulls. Han Li merely glanced at them before moving on. Though he was confident his disguise as a soaring tribe's cultivator was flawless, being surrounded by so many cultivators still left him uneasy. If a nascent soul cultivator were present, matters could easily turn disastrous. It would be far better to leave the encampment and find a secluded place nearby, then rejoin the Grey Heron tribe in 2 days. By the time they reached the Endless Sky Temple, rumors about him should have faded. He could then continue his journey and eventually leave the plains, though it would still be a long time before he could enter the great Jin Empire. Proceeding cautiously would ensure a smoother path. Having decided, Han Li calmly exited the encampment. He took out a small sword and shot away in a streak of light. Roughly 30 kilometers away, he stopped above an unremarkable stretch of rocky ground. After surveying the area, he descended atop a 20-meter-tall boulder and sat cross-legged. He released his spiritual sense, sweeping a 10-kilometer radius to confirm he was alone. Satisfied, he turned and flicked his fingers. A wave of azure sword ki sliced into the boulder, carving out a 6-meter-wide hollow just large enough for a person to enter. After testing the space, Han Li nodded faintly in satisfaction. He then walked 30 meters away and took out a set of formation flags. More than 10 streaks of light shot outward, forming an invisibility spell around the boulder. From the outside, the massive stone vanished completely. Han Li stepped into the formation in a blur and disappeared. In the blink of an eye, an entire day passed. Within the cave, Han Li sat silently in meditation, comprehending the incantation bestowed upon him by monarch soul divergence. The process went far more smoothly than he had anticipated. He was already close to completion, filling him with quiet satisfaction. Just as he pondered a troublesome portion of the incantation, his brows suddenly twitched. His mind snapped back to awareness. Han Li opened his eyes, his expression filled with astonishment. That's all for today's content. See you in the next part. Support me by becoming a member. It will give me more motivation. Thank you so much.